Well, before I introduce, let me say, I've written a lot of letters to the governor, I've written, I don't know how many letters to Pope Francis. I've written letters to individual bishops and to a number of bishops. There's a conference of California Conference of Bishops in California here. And Don and I have called them and met with them. And we talked about the need for healing. And we tell them that we'd like to heal together, and not one time has anyone ever responded, "What do you mean?" or "What can you say?" I remember one time we were meeting with 3 bishops in Sacramento, and one bishop didn't show up. I guess the meeting wasn't important to them, so they sent one of the priests. And I'm talking about the need to heal. And the priest, after I finished talking about that, he leans over and says, "Well, what can we do to help you heal?" Man, I was ready to just become violent with that guy. I mean, that just upset me so much. Didn't hear or understand a word that I was saying. But he just wanted to help us heal. Another time I went to the United Nations, and we were talking to, we tried to meet with the bishop who's a representative to the United Nations from there, the Holy See, I think that's his title. And all we can get was a meeting with a Monsignor Gretsch. So I went in and I talked to Monsignor. We went in with AIM, the American Indian Movement, the president for the West Coast, and a number of other people. And you may have been with us, Donna. I don't remember if you were or not. Yes, you were. And and we told them the story of Junipero Serra and of our tribe and the need for healing and the need for perpetrators to heal. And he looked at me and had, well, I'm going to say it politely, a crappy ass grin on his face. And he says, "Well, the winners get to write the history." And he was very proud of that. He was very proud of that. And we've also, and so we've asked a lot of people to join us or to understand the need to heal. We asked Governor Brown. I asked Lieutenant Governor Newsom. I've asked many city and county leaders. Not one group has ever said, "Val, we would like to do that. Let's work together." Now, next, we're going to have 3 sisters talk. They're the exception. They are the exception. And I'm going to ask them to just start speaking, and they'll tell you how we got in contact. And one thing we did do is we invited them to a tribal wellness meeting, one tribal wellness meeting in 2018, another in 2019. And then we also had a speaker series where we talked about, on the anniversary of Portola coming into California, we spoke about the true legacy of Portola, and they spoke there as well. So I'm going to just ask Sister Deanna Rose to take it from here. Thank you very much, Sister Deanna.
Thank you, Val. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Well, I feel so honored, and I'm full of gratitude to have been invited to be a part of your lives. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of your lives. Thank you from my heart. I was an emotional wreck myself, hearing all those stories. So I'm glad Val and Donna filled in a little time so I could recover. Well, for 60 years, I've been a Catholic sister. And the other day I was thinking, I exist here because my great-great-grandfather, von Bargen, that's my last name, came as a young adult with his 3 brothers from Hamburg, Germany, to the prairie land of north central Idaho. They were fleeing the Prussian draft in the 1880s. The dates I'm going to give you are important. Try to keep them in your head. This is the 1880s. They came. They stowed away on a commercial ship bound for the New York harbor, and then they walked across America to Idaho. That's kind of a long ways, about 3,000 miles. They wanted to take advantage of something called the Land Grant Act. European settlers were being invited. Only later, as a middle-aged woman, did I first hear about what the signs that I saw on the north central, it was the, I guess, north-south highway, number 95 in Idaho, meant. The signs said, quote, site of Nez Perce Indian War, 1877, end quote. I had never heard their story, even though I grew up very close by, almost 20-minute drive from them. So in 1977, I read about it because it was the centenary of the event, and my hometown newspaper carried the account. My mother sent me a copy. When my dad died, my brother emptied the contents of Dad's security box at his bank. It contained the original deed to Dad's grandfather's farmland in Idaho, signed by President Ulysses S. Grant in the 1880s. Only much later did I put that together with those highway signs. Nez Perce Indian War? My family had been given land that had been stolen outright from the Nez Perce Indians just 10 years earlier. When I visited Big Hole in Montana and saw some of the cost of that land grab with my own eyes, where the teepees of the fleeing Nez Perce had been set on fire in the middle of the night by the U.S. Army, only when I saw did the reality come crashing down on me. I'm an emotional wreck now. So just to go back a little bit about the ministry story of my life as a privileged white person. A typical nun. I first taught children for a few years, then switched to adult faith formation in parishes, preparing people for baptism or the baptism of their children, also organizing Bible study groups. It was only in the late 60s that I joined some of our sisters who were living among my late 60s. They were living among indigenous peoples in Southern California, Riverside County, the Saboba Reservation of the Liseño Mission Indians. They still call themselves Mission Indians. That was in the year 2007. It was while I was there that I learned quite a bit more about Junipero Serra than I'd ever heard before, and the missions of California. And the craziest thing was that this good new Pope, Francis, was intending to declare Father Serra a saint. I joined an online protest group. Somebody named Val Lopez was writing letters to the Pope. Following his good example, I wrote a letter to Pope Francis and sent him a book about genocide at the California missions. The book had been sold to me also by a sister, Kateri Mitchell, who was Mohawk and Algonquin. I sent these two things, my letter and the book, by the hand of a cardinal bishop who was on his way to Rome for a meeting with Pope Francis. I assume they got there. During my time with the Liseño, I was privileged to participate in a healing service led by Don Coyes of Colorado for survivors and descendants of survivors of the government schools. The stories of the participants affected me profoundly, as did stories that I later heard Val tell from his grandmother about the cruelties at Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista. After 9 years on the res, I officially retired and moved north here to the Bay Area, where friend Molly, who will speak soon, immediately nabbed me and a couple of other sisters to help construct a PowerPoint presentation on the doctrine of discovery. That was 4 years ago. That PowerPoint has been presented to various groups as well as high school classes in San Francisco. Later this month, we are going to present it to the sisters of our own order on Zoom, imagine. Educating our own sisters about what happened here in the United States, because we've all been so ignorant. We never learned any of this stuff when we were in school ourselves. A crying shame. And here we are calling ourselves educators. Jenny, I really identified with you when you spoke about your experience as an educator. And Athena, that the non-native people need to be educated, and how I could be an ally. That was very encouraging. And I just wanted to say to Sonia, when I went to a talk by Val before we did a walk to, I think it was one of those sacred sites, I had to go to the bathroom, so I went through the San Juan Bautista mission to find the restroom. I nearly vomited just going inside that building, now that I knew what had really happened there. So that's my story in a nutshell. I just feel so privileged to be able to virtually sit beside you today. And thank you so much for listening.
Should I go ahead, Val? Okay. My name's Molly Arthur. And yes, I have worked with Deanna Rose Von Bargen, and just think she is the kind of woman who's taught me in my education here in San Francisco. And I've worked very closely with Sister Toni Nash with the Sisters of Earth. And what I've been able to do is to pull together a presentation of images of my story. And I hope it's all right with you guys, because it's hard to follow Deanna Rose's articulate and beautiful explanation. So I'll do a share screen. And my grandmother's great-grandfather was Ignacio Ferrar Vallejo, who came to California in 1774 with the Moncado Overland Expedition. He was a soldier for the Spanish Empire and worked at 7 different missions. At one point, most of Northern California was held by his children through the Mexican land grant. This is an image of the Spanish social caste system. And you could see at the top, the pure Espanol people had the highest social standing. And my ancestor, Ignacio Vallejo, got certified by the Office of the Inquisition that he was pure Espanol. Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo was my grandmother's grandfather on my father's side. And I can understand now that he was a perpetrator of tremendous harm to the indigenous people of California. He and his family stole the land of the California Indians and enslaved them to work on their ranchos. I also read that Mariano Vallejo at the first 1850 California legislative session was instrumental in negotiating this act. And it was the new California law that controlled Indian labor, permitting the indenture of Indian children and mandating that all Indians work. On the word of any white person, any Indian deemed to be loitering or strolling about could be arrested and sold for payment of his fine to the highest bidder. This law allowed for murder of Indian parents so a white man could sell Indian children into bondage for a specified legal length of time. This law opened the gates to local vigilantes, state militia, and eventually even the US Army itself to perpetuate efforts for extermination of the indigenous peoples in California. I had searched with foreboding to find out that yes, my ancestor was deeply involved in this travesty of horrendous consequence. And yes, this was the initiation of a period of genocide of California Native people in the American period, until the 1880s. These are descendants of Mariano Vallejo in 1932. My grandmother and my father are there. They had fully assimilated into the white culture of the United States. I learned truths that are embodied in my own cellular makeup. This is an intimate story for me. How do I integrate this family inheritance into my self-identity? It is a difficult realization that I cannot divorce it from myself. There is a soul corruption and inherited trauma from being descendants of perpetrators, undergirding our benefits and privileges. I see the connection between our family history to our American culture's history. White supremacy and racism are the systems we created and perpetuate today. You heard from Sister Deanna Rose about the Society of the Sacred Heart. My mother, grandmother, all the sisters and girl cousins in my family were educated here in San Francisco by rscj since the 1890s. I'm in a committed relationship now with the society. This is my spiritual heritage, and in my exploration of this history, I have had to face more harsh truths. The society had a school in Kansas for almost 40 years until 1879 for the Potawatomi who'd been forcibly removed from the Great Lakes area. The school followed the Bureau of Indian Affairs curriculum with reporting and oversight necessary to receive the US government funding. We were very much complicit in the system of cultural genocide of indigenous peoples in the United States through the efforts to civilize and Christianize indigenous so they would assimilate into the white European American idea of worthy citizens. I learned in this book, one of our nuns wrote, other hard truths about the society and our relationship with the indigenous. When the Potawatomi were once again forced to leave their land in 1861, the rscj took possession of 300 plus acres of land from the Indian reservation for their own school, mostly for colonial settlers' children. Another legal authorization of stolen land of indigenous peoples. I believe there's an overarching moral code, no matter what time or person. I renounce the actions of my family lineage and my spiritual heritage. I do not consent to their actions in my name. Sarah is not a saint. I personally apologize for the horrors perpetrated in my name through my ancestors, both biological and spiritual. The grief and the sadness I feel are a part of me and who I am now. And it has taken many years for me to be able to feel worthy of asking for forgiveness. I now understand a fuller context of what was done and how entangled with it I am. I have changed. Who I am is altered, and I hope more fully integrated into being whole. I look to my own atonement to grasp my obligations from this personal history. Truth-telling, working to never do this kind of harm again. Working on restitution, being a faithful person. Humbleness, releasing my need for righteousness and meaning. Being in the wound of the broken, open heart, like the Sacred Heart. How to be redeemed as a perpetrator. How not do harm again when I am so deeply enmeshed in a harmful society with complicity and in collusion. When and where do I take a stand against today's corruption? Val tells me that the perpetrators must be healthy to be in relationship with those harmed. This is the Mexican land grant that my great-great-grandfather, Ignacio Vallejo, received in 1824. It is within the Amah Mutsun Ohlone territory near Watsonville. Val says we must heal together, that it is reciprocal. This is not just my solitary act of penance and atonement, I realize now, because of Val telling me this. He has invited me into relationship together to heal. He has received me, and I am with him and the Amah Mutsun tribe in this endeavor for a right relationship. It seems to me that our right relationship is also with our future generations and our Mother Earth. Currently, the land of the Amah Mutsun that was stolen by my ancestor and used for profit by cattle grazing for over 100 years is being regenerated by the Elkhorn Slough Foundation. My grandmothers have oak trees, my granddaughters have oak trees planted in their names there. There will be more openings in our work together for restitution and reparation, I hope. I commit to our wholeness and healing and redemption in mutual connection with the invitation for the Amah Mutsun. I have faith in the goodness of creation. Our healing is together. Our redemption is in relationship. Our love is for the future generations, your grandchildren and mine and all life. May we become beloved ancestors and bless us all. Whom should I turn to if not the one whose darkness is darker than night? The only one who keeps vigil with no candle and is not afraid. The deep one whose being I trust, for she breaks through the earth into trees and rises when I bow my head, faint as a fragrance from the soil. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Molly, for sharing. Now we're going to have Sister Toni share.
I just want to take a moment to honor the stories that I've heard. Molly, right now, Sister Deanna Rose, and all of you tribal members, I am so grateful. Val, no one else has ever invited me to be part of their story, to be part of their healing, to be part of their life. So I wouldn't let go of this relationship if you paid me. And it's just beginning. I'm a sister of St. Joseph. We're spread all over the world, different groups of us, and my particular group is spread all over the United States, and Peru and Japan. And I've been a sister for, I don't know, 50 some years, but probably around 56 or something like that. But I never heard about any of this true history or story of the Catholic Church in California. I never heard about it or really paid attention to what was going on until 2016. As Molly said, we're in a group called Sisters of Earth. This was a group formed by sisters and lay women who just were doing some earth work and needed a network. We needed to know who else was doing the same kind of thing. so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So our group has been meeting every 2 years for a little over 20 years. So in 2016, our conference was here in Los Gatos, and what we asked was, we asked 4 women, 3 women who were Indigenous and 1 woman who was working with Indigenous people, if they would share their story of the effects of colonization and the extractive industries on their life. So we had Melina from the Athabasca tar sands in Alberta. We had Beata and her 2 aunties from Santa Clara, New Mexico. We had Anne Marie Sayers from, I'm not sure where she's from in California. I mean, I could point it to you on the map, but I don't remember the name. And it was at that time that we found out about things like historical trauma, or generational trauma, and the doctrine of discovery. I was never taught anything like that. Thank you. Anna Marie Sayers is from Indian Canyon. We were never taught anything about this history. When I was in 4th grade, we had to make, some sort of model of a mission. We had a project we had to do. And I remember all of the teaching about how wonderful it was that we were bringing civilization to these people. So that was my indoctrination. When at this Sisters of Earth conference, we discovered the doctrine of discovery, I was horrified to think that this was something our church had perpetrated. That in, as Val said, 1452 and 53, and then 93, various documents were written by the popes granting Christian nations permission, if they found a nation that wasn't Christian, they had permission to take the land, to dominate the people, to enslave them, to appropriate all resources and wealth. And if they wanted, they could kill these people because they weren't Christians. And as Val said, or someone said, they weren't even human. And so no actions against them were considered sinful. So my first reaction was, I was horrified that my church had done this. It wasn't until the 3rd day of the conference that I remembered we had an Indian school. My community, my province, had a school in Tucson. So I started listening with a different ear to what the women were saying, but I didn't say anything. I didn't put my hand up and said, oh, we had one of those schools. I just pretty much at that point wanted to sink into the carpet. It wasn't until 6 months later that I discovered it wasn't one school we had 7 mission schools. The mission schools were in Tucson, Comatque, Fort Yuma, San Diego, Banning,
Idaho.
Yeah, Idaho, but I can't remember the one. There's one in the middle there before Idaho. But anyway, there were 7 of them. And I have,
Banning.
I mentioned Banning. I have these documents, which are archival documents. And all they say is just the year the sisters went, no, the year the mission school was open and the year it was closed and who served as administrators. There's not much information there really. So my personal response was that I had to share this message. And because I know we're getting close to time, I don't want to go into all detail. But what I discovered in trying to share this message was that it wasn't okay to just dump the information on other sisters. I had learned this over a series of months and gradually was dealing with my feelings. And the group that we have in this area about Sisters of Earth, we were also dealing with our feelings, how we felt as being part of this church that did this. So I realized that I had to deal with the feelings that I was unearthing. Some people accepted the story. Some people were buried in shame and grief. And there were people that were in denial. Just 6 months ago, I was at a meeting with a group of sisters that I've been meeting with for 16 years. And I mentioned something about our Indian schools. And one of the women said, "What Indian schools? Who told you that? I'm going to have to look that up on my own." There were other people sitting there who said, "Oh, we know about the mission schools. We've been on the track of the Seven Sisters. We went by them, or whatever." She wouldn't believe it. When all the people in the room said it, she wouldn't believe it. So that's what's going on in my community. There's some acceptance. There's some people that are buried in grief and shame, embarrassment. And there's some people that are still very much in denial. And there's a whole bunch who are in ignorance. As the sisters who served in the Indian schools have died off, us younger sisters have no connection with them. We have no remembrance. We have no stories. We haven't heard any stories from them. So as I started reflecting on all of this, I began realizing that what I was doing was very Western. It's a Western thing to dump information and not deal with feelings. A few minutes ago, someone said about, I think it was Denise, about how important it is for us to not only deal with our feelings, but invite that kind of conversation with people. So I realized that as a colonizer, I have colonized mind where I'm still dumping information on people. That's my first realization. I also noticed that we call these schools that we had mission schools, not Indian schools. So that shows you what our emphasis was. Our emphasis was on being good sisters and sharing the good news, and as Val said, bringing God to you. I want to hang my head in shame. I want you also to know, though, that missionaries who go out today do not do that. The attitude right now is we go to find God where God already is and to help people be themselves. But that wasn't what we did. What we did was, in complicity with the government, we participated in cultural genocide. My first reaction to all of this was, well, my second reaction, first was to teach everybody, and then the second reaction was, well, I better look up all these schools. I better get in touch with the people who still live there. And I want to find out if we were different, if we were nicer, if we were better. So part of my colonizer mind is that I want to be right. And I find it difficult to make mistakes and to admit that I'm wrong. Excuse me, I have an alarm going off here. And I discovered recently in the course with Molly that one of the things we need to let go of is the desire to look good, especially as sisters. That's our self-identity, is we're doing good works. We're helping people. In my community, we call everyone, including the earth, our dear neighbor. So our personal identity is that we have space in our hearts for everybody. So to learn that we were part of this effort to kill indigenous culture, language, and spirituality, it's a very identity shifting action for all of us in religious life. Either we were slaveholders or we were stealers of children. We have some complicity we need to pay attention to. So that was my third recognition, was that I have a colonizer's mind, that I want to look good, I want to feel good about myself. And there's actually a third axiom for this set, which I can't remember. Probably I'm in denial because that's probably the biggest one I need to get over. But there are three of them that we're being taught. So now what I'm working on is changing my own worldview. My healing has got to be in changing my worldview from a Western worldview, which is a dominator culture and an exploitative culture, into one that values and honors and listens. So I don't know, Val didn't mention it this time, but one of the things we had to clarify with Val is that as sisters, we really don't have any power in the church. We are not of the clerical class, and we are of the worker class, and that's why they don't let women into ordination, because then we'd become part of the clerical caste, and they don't want our voices there. So, so we don't have power in the church, but we do have power as influencers and as teachers. And various times, for example, when some of our sisters went to the United Nations and wanted to become part of the, there's a special committee council. I'm not sure what it is right now. Not the Security Council, but anyway, it's something we were petitioning to have membership in. And some of the French ambassadors said, we know these sisters and they can be trusted. They go to places where people need help, not where they can make money. They stay there for the long haul, and they come to the table without their own agenda. They come to the table with other people's agenda. So they said you can trust them. And I realized that means we need to capitalize on that trust that we have raised in people. They listen to us. They will listen to us. So my recovery process now includes helping people, sharing with people what I've learned, helping us all over our feelings of guilt and shame and grief, helping us all come to a fuller realization of our identity. And the biggest thing for me is switching from my agenda to your agenda. For example, that's why I said I'm so grateful for this invitation, Val, because you are inviting us to be part of your land trust effort. You're inviting us to be to a healing of both perpetrators and the colonized. Those are your issues, and I need to take them seriously. Karina Gould up here in the Oakland area is working on Ohlone sacred land. That's her issue, and it's the indigenous issue of the people in this area, and I need to listen to that. I've been told to wrap it up. I just want to say two other things. I'm now looking into the indigenous people in those places that I know we had mission schools, and I'm discovering that they have agendas also to save their language, to not let highways go through their sacred land, and especially to work against violence against Indian women and girls. So those, what I'm saying is, my healing is devoting myself to what I hear from you, the issues that I hear that are valuable to you, and I will bring what influence I can to those. Thank you for the honor of listening, being here.
Thank you, sisters, so much for sharing your stories. That is going to conclude our meeting.